Hey guys, Joe here. I honestly was not trying to go live yet, but here we go. So I wanted to talk about the ways to be able to charge more than your competitors. So I was actually waiting to put this live because I wanted to get the book from Alex Hormozi that talks kind of about this, right? And so some of the ways, right, is you got to look at what is, oops, shit. There we go. So what we have to look at is some of the things that a customer values. This here. All right, so get a book. This book. So this is really online marketers and stuff like that, but it will help with what you're doing. I promise. So there's a thing, I gotta see if I can find it. Of course I'm not gonna find it. But he talks about this value equation. Let me pull it up, because of course I'm not gonna find it. All right, so let me see if it shows up here. Oh, he's got a new book out. Gotta go back to this. All right, so what it talks about, there's this equation, right? Sorry, I was taking my socks off. So it basically talks about the dream outcome times the perceived likelihood of achievement is at the top of the equation, and then divide it by the time delay and then effort and sacrifice. Okay, so what it means is you're multiplying basically if you're able to give them exactly what they want and they know they're going to be able to achieve that, right? So we're looking at those types of factors. And then we're also looking at the time delay and then the effort and sacrifice. So let's look at the dream outcome. So are you able to give the customer exactly what they want or even more, right? So for, I just do fences. So if you're in the high end, like carpentry and that kind of thing, like, if you're able to give them exactly what they want and actually be able to paint that picture for them, which comes in like your sales conversation. So it's not like, they're like, hey, I want to get a kitchen done. And you are like, okay, what kind of cabinets you want, what kind of hardware you want, like that kind of stuff. You have to get more into it, right? Because you're trying to get to their dream outcome. Like they don't just want the kitchen for a kitchen. Like there's a reason for it, right? And it could be to spend more time together. Maybe they're planning, maybe they just had a kid, they're planning to have family parties all the time, whatever it may be. They want to be recognized, to have like a beautiful home, whatever it is. Like you got to find out what the dream outcome is, not so much just the kitchen, right? So that's number one. Number two, the perceived likelihood of achievement, like that what they want is actually going to happen, right? So for this, me personally, this is where you have testimonials. This is where you're relying on Google for the reviews. That especially sets the tone. Like if they are looking for a contractor and you come up with 200 reviews for 4.9 and they go through the reviews and like to hear things that really pertain to them and important to them, like that value or the likelihood of like actually achieving it is going to go way up, right? So that's building up the value for them, right? And then going back to the dream outcome, it's the same thing. Like you're not just providing, if you're just providing a kitchen like everyone else, you might only be able to charge, say, $30,000. But if you are providing, this dream outcome and you can paint a clear picture for them, well, the value of that dream is a hell of a lot more valuable than the kitchen. Right? So that'll increase it. So maybe you go to 40, 50, 70, 80, 100, whatever that number happens to be, right? So those are two things. Now, the thing that we're trying to decrease that helps build up value is the time delay and the effort and sacrifice, right? So for this, the time delay, like obviously, like if everyone else is 8, 10, 12 weeks out, or 16, 20, a year, whatever it happens to be, and you're like, I can do this and I can get started next weekend. In 3 weeks, you're gonna have this done. Well, because you're able to decrease the time, you're increasing the value, right? So I don't know if you've ever, like for me personally, like how many times have through Amazon have I bought something, like if there was 2 products, how many times have, as long as they both have decent reviews, how many times have I bought the more expensive product because it was going to come in sooner? Like all the time, like literally all the time. Even if I literally don't even need it right away, like I'm going to, I guess that's not true, but most of the time it's true. So you got to look at that, right? The effort and the sacrifice. So this is like how to decrease that, because by decreasing the effort and sacrifice on their end, that's going to raise the value, which means you can charge more money, right? So the effort and sacrifice. So as a fence company, in this area, like most of the contractors do not do the permits for the homeowner, right? Us included. We didn't do it because, like, honestly, it was too much of a headache. We didn't want to do it. However, if we did start offering that as a service, like a complete done-for-you package, we would be able to charge more, right? Even if it took us an extra $50 in labor, like we could probably charge an extra $250 just because we're making their life easier, okay? The sacrifice, you know, these could be a few things. This could be, let's see about this. So let's pretend that we have, I guess we could do the kitchen, right? So the sacrifice could be like, you know, they're worried, like typical contractors, like they're leaving your house a mess. But if you were, you know, you're like, you know, to ensure that, you know, nothing gets damaged, maybe we put down the, you know, that cardboard paper shit, you know, put that down after the end of each day, we completely, you know, wipe everything down or whatever it may be. That's going to increase the value. You could also say something like, we're actually, you know, after the project's all said and done, we hire a cleaner, they come out, and they're going to clean your entire home. They're going to concentrate on the kitchen area and the rooms outside the kitchen area to make sure everything's wiped down because of the sawdust and everything else. And we're going to take care of that, and they're going to clean the rest of their house for you, if that's what you want. Now, if there's someone that is worried about them taking their shit or whatever, then maybe you just like, look, we're going to take care of, like, the kitchen's here, you got the living room, and then you got whatever, the foyer or foyer on the sides, then maybe they do that. But it's cutting back on effort on their end, like that cleanup afterwards. They're worried about that shit. It could also be like, you know, the communication. If you are like, look, company camp, good example. You know, maybe they're away on vacation or something like that, and they want to have the communication. Well, look, we actually, I know you really value the communication and everything else. Like, we actually use company camp, and what happens is at the start of the day and at the end of the day, and maybe in the middle of the day, like the foreman takes pictures, and then you actually, we're going to give you a link, and you can actually see all those pictures, right? And, you know, that's going to increase the value, which then means you can charge more money, right? And this is where I think this biggest problem we had, honestly, as a fence company, which why we're switching over to being a supplier instead, is because for us, it's literally just a fence, right? So that whole perceived likelihood of achievement, like the project's going to go as it is. Well, worst case, like, you know, if there's us charging 8,000 and these other companies charging 6,000, what's the worst that happens? It gets installed like shit and they have to, like, someone fixes it for $500. Like, they're still making out by $1,500, right? Whereas, like, if you're doing decks or remodeling and stuff like that, that's where the name recognition, that's where your reviews, testimonials are super important, because, like, the shit's difficult, right? You know, a line could be like, literally, like, do you really, like, we're charging you $15,000. Like, do you really want to trust this company charging $7,000 for the deck? Like, do you really, you know, are you, like, okay putting your family's, you know, life on the line for this cheap company just because you want to hire this guy in a truck and just because you want to save a few grand? You know what I mean? Whereas with the fence company, you can. So, just some things to think about. I think that's really about it. It was just something that popped up in my head for some reason. I get in these spurts. You know, luckily Gary said something to me, which I did realize in the past. I uploaded the other videos, a longer video today, 20 minutes. And I've realized after the fact that, like, with YouTube, which kind of drives me crazy, is it doesn't, after the live's done, it automatically puts it as private. Like I have 5 other videos that I need to make public, but I didn't, and I kind of forgot about them. So there's like 5. So unfortunately, I think 2 of them are like updates, or 3 of them are updates. So it's kind of pointless to do an update after the fact. But there's 2. One's about if your supplier, how to know if your supplier's taking advantage of you, and I forget what the other one is, but I'll upload that probably tomorrow and the next day. I'll schedule them out. But anyway, hope this stuff helps. Again, if you, the reason why I post half the time, or when I take breaks and then end up posting, is because literally someone reaches out and is like, hey man, I miss your content, it really helps, and blah, blah, blah. And honestly, I just don't feel like, I don't bring a lot of value unless I'm bringing up like these types of videos. But if it's like the day-to-day shit you like, great. But if there's something you need help with, like I just don't have time for it now. I shouldn't say that, I could probably make time, but I'm just not willing to make time. Just because I know like when I stop focusing on one thing, like the whole thing gets diluted. Which I think there was a video from Dan Henry, which is another online marketing guy, but he talks about it as well, which is basically you have your pie, right? This is the last thing and I'm going. But you have this pie, right, of attention. I've talked about it in other videos, but in case you haven't seen it. So you have this pie of attention, and like you could, like in the beginning, like for my fence company, right? So I'd have my fence company, and that got all my attention, right? And that's all I did day after day after day. And like, I was able to grow the company pretty damn quickly. Well, then what happened is like you get kind of bored. I'm like, I'm gonna start this thing instead. So then like your pie is literally cut in half. So 50% is going to this, 50% is going to that. And then after that, it's like, I'm interested, like I'm gonna start serving, right? So then that takes a big chunk of my time. So now it's like 33, right? And then like something else gets added in. So I go from like 100% attention to like 25% attention. And then I'm like, why isn't the business growing? And that was part of the reason, but again, like I talked about in the videos at this point, I think it was the opportunity. There's a quote, I think it was Warren Buffett that said it. It definitely was Warren Buffett. I heard it through Alex Ramosi, but it's something to the effect of, it's not how hard you row, but which boat are you in, right? So you can work as hard as you possibly can, but if you're doing, if you're a contractor that's doing something that's very low end, or actually I'll forget about a contractor because I'm not too, I'm familiar, but, I used to work at McDonald's, right? So I would work, you have no idea if you've never worked at McDonald's how freaking difficult it is, right? It is nonstop all day, every day, especially depending on the location you're in. And, at the time, I think we were doing $3 million a year in hamburgers, right? This is like 10 years ago at this point when the shit wasn't like, everything's like $7 a sandwich now. But like this back in the day when everything's like the max, Big Macs are like $4 and stuff like that. But you could work as hard as you possibly can, but like it comes down to the amount, like I was in the wrong boat, right? So, I was capped at a certain amount and I couldn't make any more than that because I was in the wrong boat. And you also look at the more value you can provide to someone, the more value you're going to get in return. So again, like with the fences, it wasn't a high leverage kind of thing. So if you're constantly stuck and you feel like you're not making headway, chances are, one, you're probably not charging as much as you should be. That's number one. Number two, you're probably not getting as many leads as you should be. That's number two. Because they go kind of like hand in hand. One, if, the numbers are simple, like when you start looking at this stuff. And like after seeing the contractor's pricing, I look at their profit, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, it's too cheap. But then again, like they don't have all the overhead and everything else that we do. But I'm like, if you would literally just charge an extra, $500, right? For a larger job, like maybe it's 20 posts or something like that. So maybe, I guess that would be quite a bit. So I guess if you add an extra $10 per post, something like that, let's go with that. So 20 posts, $10 a post extra, so you're looking at an extra $200. Well, what ends up happening is before, if you're only making $800, but now you're making, $1,000, like you're literally making 25% more, right? And it's a big chunk of change because like when you start looking at this stuff, you know, if it's only $200 and you're doing 3 jobs a week, right? So that's $600, you know, times 5, right? You're by the 50, and then that's, you know, it's $30,000. Well, if you're only on average making, again, $800 per job, you would have had to do like an extra 38 jobs in order to make the same amount of profit, right? Just by charging an extra 20 bucks. Well, a lot of people, they're not willing or able to do it because it's the lack of leads. It could be also the lack of sales process and everything else, but I feel like it's because of the lack of leads, just because if you don't have enough work as it is, you don't feel comfortable charging more. But if you start loading up your schedule and you're booked out like 16 weeks, you're like, screw it. Like, you know, we would do the same thing. Like, you know, especially come spring and summer, it's like, you know, you start at X amount of price, and then each week I would just add 100, and then another 100, another 100, and then, but that took us from making like $1,200 per day in profit to closer to like $2,000 a day. And then, but this year, honestly, it's been tougher, like really tough, and like we're back down to like that $1,500 and $1,700 range and barely booking. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then, but I see all the pricing from all these other companies, and I realize that there's a million companies out there, like 100 companies doing friggin' fences. And I'm like, no frigging wonder. Like these, I know what these guys charge because they're part of this program, but like it's crazy. Like it's crazy, and there's so many people willing to do it. So if you're in a business where like if you can get into something where maybe there needs to be some kind of like requirements such as licenses or testing and stuff like that, like you're honestly better off. It's harder to get into, but because it's harder to get into, way less people are willing to do it. So anyway, I got to get some work done. I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I will talk to you at some point.